Welcome to Book Nibbles. Big ideas, small bites. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring is a landmark work that transformed the way humans perceive their relationship with the natural world, revealing the hidden consequences of technological progress on life itself. Published in 1962, the book opens with a haunting vision: a town where birds no longer sing, insects have vanished, and the natural rhythms of life are broken, leaving the landscape eerily silent. This image is more than literary flourish. It serves as a metaphor for the ecological imbalance humans have created, an imbalance caused largely by the widespread use of synthetic pesticides, particularly DDT, whose effects ripple far beyond the immediate target species. Carson's writing is at once lyrical and precise, blending scientific rigor with a compelling narrative that invites readers to recognize the intimate interconnections among all living organisms. The opening chapters immerse readers in the scale and beauty of the natural world, detailing the intricate networks that sustain life. Carson emphasizes that ecosystems are not isolated. Every organism, from the smallest insect to the tallest tree, plays a role in maintaining balance. She provides vivid examples of predator-prey relationships, pollination, nutrient cycles, and the complex interplay between soil, water, and organisms. This background is crucial because it establishes why human interference, especially chemical intervention, can have cascading, often unforeseen consequences. Carson's clarity in describing ecological processes allows readers without a scientific background to understand how delicately life is balanced and why disrupting even a single component can provoke widespread, sometimes catastrophic effects. Carson then transitions to the modern chemical era, tracing the rise of synthetic pesticides after World War II. These chemicals were initially celebrated as miracles, capable of dramatically increasing crop yields, controlling disease vectors, and protecting forests. Among them, DDT emerged as a symbol of progress. Farmers and public health officials deployed it liberally, often with little regard for dosage, application methods, or long-term impact. Carson critiques this uncritical embrace of technology, illustrating how societal enthusiasm for chemical solutions often outpaces scientific understanding of their broader consequences. Through anecdotes, she recounts how whole landscapes were sprayed without consideration of timing, species diversity, or environmental persistence, creating conditions for unintended ecological disruption. One of the book's central themes is bioaccumulation, the process by which chemicals like DDT persist in the environment, concentrating in the tissues of organisms and magnifying as they move up the food chain. Carson provides detailed examples. Fish in sprayed ponds absorb DDT. Birds that eat those fish accumulate even higher concentrations, and predatory birds such as eagles and falcons face reduced fertility and fragile eggshells as a direct result. She highlights research showing that DDT led to widespread declines in bird populations, turning her metaphorical silent spring into a scientifically grounded prediction. Carson meticulously documents these findings, showing that the chemical did not discriminate. It affected both pests and beneficial species alike, ultimately undermining the very ecosystems humans sought to protect. Carson is careful to integrate human health concerns alongside ecological ones. She describes how pesticides can enter the human body, accumulate in fatty tissues, and disrupt physiological processes. Citing studies of farmers, factory workers, and residents in sprayed areas, she draws connections between chemical exposure and neurological, reproductive, and developmental harm. These examples are not alarmist. Instead, they are evidence-based, emphasizing that the very tools intended to protect human life through increased agricultural output or disease control also pose significant, often invisible risks. Carson's narrative underscores the paradox of technological intervention. Solutions that appear effective in the short term can create profound, long-term challenges. Throughout the book, Carson employs vivid case studies to illustrate the scope and complexity of the problem. She recounts towns where spraying for mosquitoes caused fish kills and declines in bird populations, where crops were initially protected only to later reveal outbreaks of secondary pests previously controlled by natural predators. She details the cumulative effects of repeated spraying over decades, showing how soils, waterways, and organisms became reservoirs of persistent chemicals. In each example, Carson emphasizes the interconnectedness of ecosystems. Humans may target one species, but the ripple effects can destabilize entire communities of plants and animals. These stories serve both as cautionary tales and as compelling arguments for rethinking how society approaches pest control and environmental stewardship. Carson also addresses the prevailing mindset among chemical manufacturers, agricultural advisors, and government agencies. She documents how industry propaganda promoted a narrative of safety and necessity, often dismissing or undermining independent scientific research that suggested harm. Carson presents compelling evidence of corporate influence on policy and public perception, detailing instances where data was ignored, studies suppressed, or the complexity of ecological impact simplified for marketing purposes. This critique extends to regulatory frameworks, which Carson argues were insufficiently robust to evaluate long-term environmental consequences. The book exposes a pattern in which immediate economic or practical benefits were prioritized over ecological and human health considerations, highlighting a systemic failure in responsible governance. In addition to critiquing chemical practices, Carson advocates for a more holistic approach to pest management, emphasizing biological and ecological principles. She describes how natural predators, crop rotation, habitat management, and selective intervention can control pest populations without causing widespread collateral damage. By presenting examples of successful non-chemical pest control, she demonstrates that human ingenuity can harmonize with nature rather than dominate it. Carson's approach is deeply prescriptive yet grounded in real-world evidence, showing that ecological awareness can coexist with agricultural productivity. She stresses that responsible stewardship requires knowledge, observation, and patience, not merely reliance on powerful chemicals. A significant portion of the book explores the resilience and adaptability of natural systems. Carson details how ecosystems can recover when human interference is minimized, providing hope that environmental damage, while serious, is not necessarily irreversible. She cites research on abandoned farmlands, restored wetlands, and recovered bird populations to illustrate that with careful management and reduced chemical reliance, nature has an inherent capacity for renewal. These examples reinforce her central thesis. Humans are participants in, not masters of, ecological systems, and our survival depends on respecting that role. Carson also masterfully weaves narrative elements into her scientific exposition. She recounts personal observations, such as her walks in the countryside, encounters with farmers and scientists, and her meticulous documentation of pesticide impacts. These vignettes humanize the science, allowing readers to experience the world through Carson's eyes, noticing the absence of birdsong, observing poison ponds, or witnessing the vulnerability of fragile species. Her narrative style combines clarity, rigor, and lyricism, making complex ecological concepts accessible without diminishing their seriousness. By engaging readers emotionally and intellectually, Carson transforms abstract data into compelling, urgent storytelling. The book further explores ethical and philosophical dimensions, questioning humanity's assumption of dominance over nature. Carson challenges the notion that technological control equates to progress, emphasizing that the desire to eliminate every threat can create deeper, systemic harm. She invites reflection on responsibility, caution, and humility, advocating for a worldview in which humans recognize their dependence on and obligation to the broader web of life. These reflections resonate beyond the specific case of pesticides, suggesting a framework for ethical decision-making in all interactions with the environment. Carson's work also anticipates modern concepts of environmental risk assessment and precautionary principle. She argues that because chemical impacts are often long-term and cumulative, interventions should be evaluated conservatively, with full consideration of ecological complexity. She details instances in which short-term experiments or limited studies failed to capture the long-term consequences of pesticide use, demonstrating the importance of longitudinal research and comprehensive monitoring. These insights were groundbreaking at the time, framing environmental responsibility not as reactionary, but as proactive, requiring foresight, scientific rigor, and ethical consideration. Throughout the narrative, Carson integrates compelling examples of public health consequences. She describes outbreaks of human disease that were exacerbated by ecological disruption, illustrating how pesticide misuse can create unintended health crises. For instance, eliminating predator species that naturally controlled pest populations sometimes led to secondary infestations, ultimately increasing human exposure to disease vectors. Carson emphasizes that ecological imbalance is not merely an environmental concern, but a human health issue, reinforcing the interconnectedness of natural and human systems. Carson also critiques the rhetoric of invincibility surrounding chemical solutions. She documents promotional materials, speeches, and publications claiming that DDT and similar compounds were harmless, omnipotent, and essential for progress. By juxtaposing these claims with empirical evidence of harm to wildlife, soil, and humans, she reveals the dangers of unquestioned faith in technological solutions. Carson's critique extends to a broader cultural attitude, the belief that human ingenuity can dominate and control nature without consequence. She argues for a paradigm shift, advocating for humility, observation, and respect for ecological limits. One of the most striking aspects of Silent Spring is its attention to temporal and spatial scale. Carson demonstrates that pesticide effects are neither immediate nor localized. They unfold over years and travel across ecosystems. She documents instances of chemical residues persisting in soil, contaminating water sources, entering food chains, and impacting distant regions through migratory species. This emphasis on scale reinforces the urgency of understanding ecological consequences and the insufficiency of narrow, short-term thinking in environmental management. Carson also humanizes the struggle for environmental awareness by including stories of scientists, activists, and ordinary citizens who recognized harm and advocated for change. She highlights the courage required to speak truth to power in a context dominated by industry and bureaucratic resistance. These narratives underscore the social dimensions of ecological stewardship. Science alone is insufficient without advocacy, public engagement, and institutional accountability. Carson's work thus bridges natural history, ethics, and civic responsibility, illustrating the multifaceted effort required to protect life on Earth. The book concludes with both warning and hope. Carson emphasizes that the silent spring she feared is not inevitable if humans act with knowledge, caution, and respect for natural systems. She advocates for integrated approaches to pest management, robust regulatory oversight, ongoing research, and public awareness. Carson's message is clear. Humans have the capacity to protect or destroy, and the choice lies in deliberate, informed, and ethically grounded action. She envisions a future in which scientific insight and moral responsibility guide human interaction with the natural world, fostering coexistence rather than domination. Carson's Silent Spring is not merely a treatise on pesticides. It is a manifesto for ecological consciousness. It combines meticulous scientific research with compelling storytelling, ethical reflection, and urgent advocacy. Through vivid examples, rigorous evidence, and eloquent prose, Carson demonstrates the fragility of ecological systems and the far-reaching consequences of human intervention. The book illuminates the interdependence of all life, the ethical responsibilities of humans as stewards of the earth, and the potential for informed, deliberate action to safeguard the natural world. Ultimately, Silent Spring challenges readers to reconsider their relationship with the environment, highlighting that technological progress, if untempered by ecological understanding, can threaten both wildlife and human health. Carson's enduring contribution lies in her ability to synthesize science, observation, and moral insight into a narrative that is as emotionally compelling as it is intellectually rigorous. By documenting the effects of pesticides on birds, fish, insects, and humans, and by illustrating the broader ecological and ethical implications, Carson provides a roadmap for understanding the consequences of human action and for cultivating a more responsible, informed, and harmonious relationship with the living world. Her work transformed public consciousness, inspired policy reform, and laid the foundation for the modern environmental movement. Through eloquence, precision, and unwavering ethical commitment, Carson's Silent Spring remains a testament to the power of observation, courage, and the enduring responsibility of humans to live in balance with nature. By blending narrative, science, and advocacy, she not only documented a crisis, but offered a vision of hope, a path forward in which humans can choose to protect rather than destroy, to harmonize rather than dominate, and to ensure that future springs are filled with the song of life rather than the silence of loss. And that's it. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.